Hey everyone, it's Drayton from ScaleTrains, and today I'm here to talk about Norfolk Southern Silverside Coal Gondolas. These were some of the first unit train cars. They used aluminum, so they were a much lighter weight than previous coal hopper designs, which allowed Southern Railway to pack these cars as high as possible, carrying the most amount of tonnage while also going easy on bridges and things like that. So, throughout the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, Southern Railway operated these cars in the Virginias, coming down from interstate territory down into the Carolinas, and especially in North Carolina, where they operated on Norfolk Southern's famous W line. And for those unfamiliar with the W line, that's the same stretch of railroad home to North America's steepest mainline railroad grade, Saluda, which had an average gradient of 4.7%. All of us have seen the Southern Railway training video from the early 80s of trains tackling this incredible grade, and this was known as the Belmont Coal Train. And a lot of people are familiar with the Southern Railway look, 4 SD40-2s and sometimes SD45s mixed in there with bright Southern Railway green lettering, or in earlier eras, reddish lettering. But as time went on, after the Norfolk Southern merger, many of these cars were repainted and relettered with what's known as the Clater era Southern Railway lettering. This was done so for legal purposes and liability purposes to differentiate Southern Railway owned equipment from Norfolk and Western owned equipment. Although it was under Norfolk Southern Corporation, the two railroads were kept separately on paper, which ushered in the Clater era. And until the early 90s, the two railroads still received cars lettered for their former names, Norfolk and Western and Southern Railway. So in this first run of Fox Valley cars in HO and N scale, we're offering them in the 80s and 90s era look. So this would be really great for Norfolk Southern modelers. You can have a little bit of N&W and Southern Railway motive power mixed in together. And the thing is since so many people are familiar with that Southern Railway Saluda Grade training video, not a lot of people have seen this unit train running down Saluda Grade in Norfolk Southern times. And so we thought, who better to talk to about that than our good friend Ed Painter, who documented many of these unit trains running up and down Saluda Grade in the late 80s through the 90s. And so we sat down with Ed to kind of recall some of his memories on Saluda Grade and also some of the other places that he documented these trains, including on former N&W territory, which is something that I learned through the process of recording this video. So without further ado, I'm going to let Ed take it away. He's going to kind of set the stage for where he was in the 80s, late 80s, when he began documenting these trains on video. All right, Ed, take it away.
It was near where I lived. It was about an hour or so from where I live in the Clemson, South Carolina area, and ended up meeting somebody, girlfriend-wise. I had a girlfriend lived over there, so it was a pretty good deal. I worked for Duke Energy, and I worked at Oconee Nuclear Station, and I worked with steam generator maintenance. So the type of activities like project management, scheduling, all those kind of things, and been managing the projects. Duke at the time had 3 nuclear stations, a total of 3, 4, 5, 6 units, 7 units. And they had a significant number of coal-fired power plants, such as Plant Allen, which is where the Belmont coal trains went, Marshall, where the Catawba coal trains went, and Blues Creek, where coal trains came down from the N&W and served that north, that's near Winston-Salem, near Martinsville, Virginia. But coal was a huge input of electricity to Duke Power. Catawba coal trains and Belmont coal trains originated in southwestern Virginia. They came down from Appalachia, Andover, came down to Bulls Gap, and then they went on down to Asheville. And at Asheville, the Catawba coal trains went on east to Plant Marshall, north of Charlotte, and the Belmont coal trains went down Saluda and came down the Piedmont Division main line and went up to Plant Allen. These trains had Silverside gonds, exclusively Silverside gonds, and they were designed for coal use like this. They were built in a way where the unloading and so forth and loading could be done efficiently. And they were quite interesting. They're also made of aluminum, which meant they were lighter, which meant that the train wasn't as heavy as it would have been had they been carbon steel cars. These particular cars were built for the Southern Railway and were built to serve coal-fired power plants in Southern's operating area. They weren't painted. They were made of aluminum and had aluminum silver-looking sides. Coal dust can, when it gets on a train car or anything, basically, it can just sort of mask what the original color everything was. And you got water and it sticks and this, that, and the other. So the cars were pretty ugly and dirty looking. And when they would go back and do re-lettering, for instance, you could see where they had cleaned off the area where the lettering would go, and you had silver again with coal dust all around it and this new lettering on it. And these cars too, not just Duke Energy or Duke Power, these cars were used Alabama Power in Birmingham, north of Birmingham, and power plants in other parts of the South too. I can remember, like, with the earliest times that I saw Silverside gonds were really into the Southern era still. But I saw some in and around Andover, Appalachia, Virginia, some tipples and so forth there. Never really watched trains running with them, but simply saw them when I was out there taking pictures. I read something today that said they ran these virtually every day at one point. Virtually every day at one point. They saved about 60 or 70 route miles, by taking them this way. They had to, of course, deal with the operating issues with Saluda. You had to stop trains, set retainers, stop the train, look at dynamic brakes and see that they were good, and inspect everything. So you lost a lot of time with doing some of those things. Even I read something one time that was talking about the trade-off, financially or operationally with that. But you save 60 to 70 miles by taking it down Saluda, then Spartanburg on the Piedmont Division main line to Belmont, which is just on the it's on the edge of Charlotte, on the west side of Charlotte. But it's not in Charlotte, but metropolitan. Typical day. You get out there, they did a turn, I think 5 or 6 days a week. So this train came out of Asheville. It had a lot of wood chip cars, had mixed freight and so forth, and it would go down the grade first thing in the morning. You had to have a road foreman ride the train down the grade every time a train went down the grade, which is interesting. And then it would go to Asheville. It would switch out these cars and come back with wood chip loads, a variety of different things. Oddly enough, there's an 86-foot Harlow Parts box car on it pretty regularly, the last car. But when it came back to Saluda, stop at Melrose, they would take the train up in sections depending on how long it was or whatever, how many sections. They could only take 11 loaded wood chip cars up at a time with 3 SD 4040-2s, steepest mainline grade in the United States, right at 5% at one location. Now, some days, be lucky and hit a Belmont coal train. I think I photographed one at night one time, and there's some others. Sometimes you catch a hopper train coming back, a Belmont hopper train coming back. And other times there were, I can't remember the name of the power plant, but there was other coal trains would go down, and they were going to like South Carolina, somewhere in South Carolina, eastern South Carolina, SCG&E or whoever. But so those are the things you expect to see with some regularity. But it's just a fun place. When you had the train come back from Spartanburg, it took a whole bunch of hours just to take that up and down the grade. It was just a big show for the period of time it took to get the train, the cuts of the train back up and put together. So the only trains that came back up Saluda and completely stayed intact that I'm aware of were the Belmont hopper trains or Belmont empties that came back. And it would come up the grade at a pretty dang decent speed, head end wide open, mid trains wide open, and I can remember shooting it at the steepest point in the grade one time, and it just was pretty cool, And it never stopped in Saluda; it just kept on going. So that's the only train that I know did that. The other coal trains that went to South Carolina that were not Silversides, I don't recall them coming back as a complete train. They may have, but and you still got to be really careful with not tearing your train in two or something with all that. I always thought it was interesting. A road foreman I knew, he laughed about taking a train down Saluda. If you went to McDonough, where they have their simulators for taking trains, your train handling and so forth, if you just turned it over to the simulator, it would break the train in two every time. That's what he told me. So that's pretty interesting. But, you know, it's just a very, very unique situation railroad-wise. Power for the Asheville-Spartanburg turn, that was the preferred power by the crews were 3 SD40-2s or SD40 intermingled with that. But you would still see C39-8s and SD50s, SD60s. So you had a little bit of variety with all that. And Belmont coal trains and so forth at this time, you saw SD60s, SD50s. You may see an intermingling of some older units, SD45 or whatever. Always 6 axles. He had a grade to pull, you know. And likewise, when you're taking the train down the grade, you got to be able to hold it back with dynamics and everything. So another place I saw Silversides after Norfolk Southern was west of Bluefield on the former Pocahontas division. And I saw more than one train on occasion that was just all Silverside hoppers. Probably, very likely, they are Duke Power trains. Maybe trains that went down to Blues Creek. I don't know that the CP&L Duke merger had taken place at that point, but Blues Creek was a very large, the largest fossil plant I think on Duke's system.
And the moral of the story is the Silversides, after the merger, were not just captive to Southern territory.
No, they were captive in Southern N&W locations in general. They were captive in this area to Duke Power, Duke Energy trains, for the most part. But again, you can go to Alabama Power, you know, other places, other locations where they use these. ScaleTrains is producing these cars both in N gauge and HO gauge. And they're the latter post-1982 paints, Norfolk Southern. Some of them had the Clater style lettering where Southern is spelled out. And then later they got NS lettering and such. These are sort of cool to me, the cars are, because these are what I observed, whether it's on the Belmont trains, Catawba trains, or over in West Virginia, the paint schemes and so forth and so on. And just something really nice to reminisce about. I can sort of see these things in action years ago, and it's just a nice thing. And ScaleTrains produces a significant number of locomotives, and they produce locomotives that would very well work with these trains, whether Catawba, Belmont, or whatever. So operator cars are significantly less expensive than rivet counters. They've got a lot of good detail, but they're not as easy to break or damage, and it should be a good opportunity for modelers to get these, and it'd be much less expensive. So these cars will be a nice addition to anybody's railroad. And I can't wait to see some running on mine, because I think they'll really look good and they'll bring back those memories.
You know, right now is a great time to place your pre-orders, whether it's HO or in scale. These are going to be wonderful cars. These cars being in the operator line, they've got molded on grab irons for the first time and nice underbody detail, as well as train line hoses, which is a really neat detail. And like I said, we're accepting pre-orders for these now. They arrive at different times, so make sure you go to ScaleTrains.com to see the ETA on these models, but click the links in the video description if you're an HO or N-scale guy. Make sure you get your pre-orders in. Well, as always, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this video, learning a little bit more about unit coal train operations on Saluda Grade, and a big thank you to our friend Ed Painter for sitting down and sharing his memories with us. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the like button, and ring that bell so that you get notified when we upload more videos just like this. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.